I work second shift at a plant about 26 miles from my house. I get off at 11. The road home is a two-lane county route that doesn't even have a number most people would recognize. There is no shoulder. Corn grows on both sides most of the year, then black dirt, then corn again. I've driven it for 9 years. I know it the way you know a song you didn't mean to memorize. There's a house about halfway, maybe 12 miles in. It is set back from the road with a gravel drive grown over and no mailbox left. The roof is half collapsed on the south side, and the front porch is sagging. I've watched it die slowly. The windows went first, then the screen door, then the paint. Last winter, the porch swing finally fell. Nobody has lived in it since I started at the plant. I asked an old man at work once, and he said the woman who lived there died in the late 80s. The family fought over it, it never sold, and it just rotted. When you drive past something for 9 years, you stop seeing it. It becomes part of the road. The way the curve at mile 14 has a deer carcass that turns into bones every winter, or the way the gas station at the four-way has the same handwritten sign about cigarettes. You notice it the first 100 times, and then it just is. I don't know why I noticed the porch light. It was a Tuesday in late October, cold enough to fog the windshield if I didn't keep the defrost running. I was thinking about nothing, about whether I had eggs at home, or about a kid at work who keeps messing up the inventory sheets. Then I came around the bend before that house and the porch light was on. Just on. A yellow bulb. Bare, hanging from a wire above the door. I slowed down. I didn't stop, just slowed enough to look. The light made a circle on the porch boards, and I could see, well, nothing. Just the porch. Just the place where the swing used to be. The door was closed. I drove home. I told my wife about it the next morning. She said maybe somebody bought it or was fixing it up. She said it like that was the obvious answer, and it kinda was. Houses get bought and people fix them up, even ones that look like that. The next night, driving home, the light was on again. And the night after that. I should explain that there are no neighbors out there. The closest house is a dairy operation about a mile south, and the closest house north is mine. If somebody was fixing it up, they were doing it at night, alone, 12 miles from anything. On Friday, I got off at 11, slept until 7, and drove back out there in daylight. The place looked the same as it had for 9 years. The roof was caved on the south side, the porch was sagging, and the windows were dark and mostly broken. The gravel drive was overgrown with the remnants of last summer's weeds. There were no tire tracks, no tools, and no ladder leaning anywhere. Nobody was fixing anything. The porch light bulb was there, naked, hanging from its wire. I walked up the drive close enough to see it. The wire ran into the porch ceiling and disappeared. I couldn't tell if there was still wiring in the house or anything else. I didn't go up on the porch. I'm not sure why, it just felt like something I shouldn't do. I drove home and didn't tell my wife I went out there. We've been married 11 years. I tell her everything, but I didn't tell her this. That night, driving home from work, the porch light was on. I'm not a man who scares easily. I worked corrections for 6 years before the plant. I've been around things people would rather not know about. I'm not bragging. I'm telling you so you understand when I say I started to feel something I hadn't felt since I was a kid. It was something low in the stomach, the kind of feeling where your body knows before your head does. Monday night, the light was on and the door was open. Not wide, just a few inches. Enough that the porch light made a wedge of yellow on the floor inside. I slowed almost to a stop. I could see, and this is going to sound stupid, I could see the floor inside. It was linoleum, the kind they put in farm kitchens in the 70s, a yellow and brown pattern. That floor has not existed in that house for years. Those windows have been open to the weather for years. There is no kitchen floor in there. There is only rot, animal waste, and whatever else 30 years of neglect does to a room. But there it was, yellow and brown linoleum, clean. I drove home and I didn't sleep. Tuesday, I called in sick, the first time in 2 years. My wife asked what was wrong, and I said I thought I was getting something. She put her hand on my forehead, as she always does, and said I didn't feel hot. She suggested I go to the doctor, and I told her I would. I didn't go to the doctor. I sat in the kitchen, drank coffee, and tried to figure out what to do. Here's what I want you to understand. I am 38 years old. I own a house. I have a wife and a 14-year-old daughter. I work 52 hours a week at a place that smells like burnt corn and machine oil. And when I come home, I eat dinner, watch TV, and go to bed. I am not a person who has experiences. I am a person who has a life. I drove out there Tuesday afternoon. It was a bright, cold day with a sky like a sheet of tin. I parked on the road and walked up the drive. The porch light was off. Of course it was off. It was the middle of the day. I went up on the porch. The boards held. They shouldn't have, but they did. The door was closed. I tried the handle and it turned. I am telling you the truth. I didn't break in. The door was unlocked. Inside, the kitchen had a yellow and brown linoleum floor. There was a table, 4 chairs, and a fridge that was running so loudly I could hear it. There were dishes in the drying rack next to the sink, a coffee cup, and a plate. There was no smell. No animal smell, no mildew. The air was a little stale, the way a house is when nobody has been home for a few hours. That was all. On the kitchen table, there was a piece of mail. It was addressed to me, at my address, with my name on it. It was a phone bill from our provider for last month. I don't know how long I stood there. It was probably under a minute. I felt my body decide to leave before my head caught up. I walked out of that kitchen, off that porch, down that drive, and into my truck. I drove home, and the whole time, my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't grip the wheel properly. I got home, and my wife was in the kitchen making dinner. She turned around and smiled at me, asking how I was feeling. She said she had called and left me lunch in the fridge, but I must have gone out because the truck was gone when she came by on her break. She works at the credit union in town. She comes home for lunch sometimes. I knew this. I have known this for 11 years. I said, "Yeah, I went out for some air." She said, "Good, fresh air is good for you," and turned back to the stove. I went into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to think. I tried to think about the phone bill on that kitchen table 12 miles out on the county road, about how it got there, about who put it there, about what they wanted. And then I heard her in the kitchen, humming. She was humming the same melody she always does, a song from a movie we saw on our second date. She has hummed that song for 11 years, and I realized I had not heard her hum it since last Tuesday. The Tuesday I first saw the porch light. I'm writing this from the bathroom. I locked the door. I can hear her in the kitchen. She is still humming. Dinner smells like dinner. Everything in this house looks like my house. But the bathroom mirror, the one over the sink, the one I've shaved in front of every morning for 11 years, has a small chip in the bottom corner. My wife dropped a curling iron in the sink in 2019, and it bounced up and chipped the glass. I remember the day. I remember her crying because she thought I'd be mad about a mirror. The mirror in front of me right now does not have a chip. She just called my name from the kitchen. She said, "Dinner's ready. I'm going to have to come out of this bathroom." Mom always said that Nana was psychotic, and right after Toby was born, Nana got really upset when my mom established boundaries. I've never witnessed a more sour woman in my life, as her face puckered up and she shook her head at the new rules. Nana said she would try to tolerate that kind of nonsense and stormed out the front door. The days after, I could hear Nana and Mom arguing over the phone about some rule that shouldn't have been stated in the first place, like how often she gets to see her grandkids since Toby had been born. Visits had been cut from every weekend to once a month. Mom would tell Nana that her craziness was raining down on us kids, and that it was time to introduce more logic into our minds than witchcraft and stargazing. I was crafting dolls out of twigs, like Nana taught me, when Mom broke and made the call. That's when Nana started coming over for any excuse to see Toby and me, and her tricks at first always worked as she wiggled her way inside and into the living room, where Toby and Dad were sitting with me on the couch. Nana always brought us goodies when she came over, too. She always made some kind of fresh-baked pastry, bringing them over from her special little book with a leather red cover that she keeps on the top shelf in her kitchen. Everything Nana baked was mouth-wateringly delicious, and not even my parents could deny the sweet pastries that Nana handed out, still warm from the oven. Once she brought her specially made chocolate chip cookies with a nostalgic taste you can never quite put into words. It was like you had a memory intertwined with this particular flavor, and your mind just couldn't grasp what it was. Whatever the memory was, it made everyone feel warm and loved. Nana also made a special pie from the recipe in her secret red book that gave your brain an overload of endorphins, and the positivity that broke free from that blueberry pie made everyone get in a good mood, even if you were feeling the worst in your life. It was like her baking was magic, and from spending so much time with Nana, I definitely believed in the wide stretch of imaginable wonderments, such as working spells and potions meant to kill. Nana spoke to me about everything. Mom noticed Nana's sporadic visits and began putting an end to them. If she no longer allowed every weekend, it certainly didn't mean every other day at our house with baked goods and thrilling memories. Mom was always mad at Nana for showing up, but always let her in as the aromas of the pastries beckoned to her desires. This time was different though, as I saw Mom plug her nose when she answered the door and spoke with a very strong, authoritative tone. I heard Mom say Nana could not come to the house anymore. Nana went away, throwing a fit and causing a scene on the front lawn with Mom and Nana screaming at each other in a language I didn't know. So Mom was finally putting her foot down, and Nana was not happy about it. For a while, we didn't hear from Nana. There was no knocking on the front door with a basket of bread or cupcakes, and there were no bribes of muffins and brownies. It was an odd feeling being away from Nana for so long, and I wondered why Mom felt so relieved. Nana was great and had a warm, caring spirit. She had never wronged anyone who didn't deserve it, at least as far as I had witnessed her cast curses upon men and give poisons out to women from her shop. I also knew the people she targeted were bad and had a cursed spirit that needed to be dealt with immediately. Nana was tricky when it came to her sales, for she gave you what she thought you needed, not what the customer requested, and she did this by looking into their soul and feeling past their beating heart. I guess those are some of the reasons why we weren't allowed to see Nana, and why Nana couldn't be a big part of Toby's life, like she was in my own. I didn't like being away from Nana, and I would argue with my mother about visiting her. I couldn't drive yet, and Mom wouldn't even let Nana come get me. It was an unfair situation, and I didn't like not being able to see Nana as much as I always had. I just didn't understand. Then one morning, there was a soft knock on the door, and I looked out the front window to see Nana and her baked goods. I ran to the door before my mom could and welcomed Nana inside. Mom was furious until Nana handed her a pan of fresh banana bread, saying Toby and I couldn't have it because it was too boozy for children our age, and that it was marketed specifically for my mother and father's consumption. Nana didn't stay long because she said she didn't want to cross my mom's boundaries, which she said with a venomous spat rather than a voice of understanding. After Nana left, I saw her peel out of our driveway as I waved goodbye with tears in my eyes. I watched the banana bread sit until the next morning when Mom and Dad were eating it with their coffee. I watched as they ate it slice by slice until it was finished, and I was left alone with my mother in the kitchen while my dad went upstairs to get ready for the day. When I finished breakfast, I went to the living room and sat down on the couch before looking out the window and seeing Nana parked across the street, waiting for something. I was about to tell my mom, but I heard her start to scream from the kitchen. I bolted up and ran as I heard my father's cry from upstairs. My mother was in the kitchen by the counter, holding her face with her hands as she cried out. When she moved her hands, I let out a scream as blood poured from every orifice on her head. She fell to her knees in agony, and I ran to her, afraid and wanting to help. I then watched as the top of her head began to peel open like a banana. I could see her skull as the flesh began to fall strip by strip from her face to her midsection. Her skin slipped off her muscles and created a puddle of sludge beneath where my mother sat, and her lower body skin curled up as her toes twirled inward and her legs twisted into her knees. Dad fell down the stairs as his skin completely slipped off his body. He was sliding all over with warm blood on his feet. His eyes were the most shocking of all, as they popped roundly out of his head like bulbous balloons. I could hear Toby beginning to cry in the living room, but I was crying too hard myself to comfort him. Dad slid toward Mom, who was curled up on the floor. He picked her up and sat her against his side, while he held her against an agonizing burn of pure muscle against the raw elements. I watched them whisper to one another before they died in each other's arms. That's when the front door flew open, and Nana came in to soothe my crying brother. She held him against her chest and held her hand out for me as she led me out of our home in the Highland District. She said we would pack up later, but right now, we needed to go to her house at the Blackwood Manor while she called the police about this tragic event. I never stopped crying even as Toby was soothed by his pacifier. When we got to Nana's house, she wiped my tears and held me against her tall, bony body. She told me everything was going to be okay, and that my brother and I would live with her from now on. That's what I wanted, wasn't it? To be with Nana all the time. I don't know how my parents died the way they did, but I always suspected the banana bread that Nana made, and how she told them it was made with extra love. I shivered as I looked at Nana and wondered if she was capable of doing such a thing. I didn't think about it anymore. I locked the thought away and ran to Nana for some warmth and comfort. Nana adopted us, and she raised us to believe in the damned and the spirit man, who you can trade with if you have something he desires. Nana said we didn't have to worry about the bodies because the spirit man was going to clean up the mess. Somehow he did, as in the papers. The headline read, "Suicide, Homicide." And that's all Nana told me about the report. I couldn't figure out how that worked considering how devastating my parents' death had been, but I didn't think about it. I was just happy that we had Nana, and our Nana loved us so much. I've been staring at my phone for 3 hours now. It began as a normal Tuesday night. I was alone in my loft in Silver Creek, scrolling through old photos, when my screen lit up with a notification from an unfamiliar number. "Unknown, I see that your light is still on." I froze. I replied, "Who is this?" The response arrived in less than 2 seconds. "Unknown, someone who has been following you for a long time." My stomach dropped. I walked to my window and pulled the curtain back slightly. Nothing but a dark, empty street and a single flickering lamppost 3 buildings down. I texted, "This is not funny. Stop." "Unknown, you are wearing a gray shirt, the one with a small tear at the collar." I looked down at my shirt. There was a tear at the collar. My hands began shaking so violently that I nearly dropped my phone. I rushed to every window in my loft and locked every door. I called the police. They stated that they would send someone to check the area. While I waited, I sat in the corner of my bedroom, lights turned off, trying to control my breathing. Then my phone vibrated again. Unknown, it was smart to turn off the lights. But you forgot about the one down the hall. I hadn't told anyone I had turned off the lights. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched both the building and the street. They found no one. The officer, Sergeant Silas, told me it was probably a prank and advised me to block the number. I nodded and thanked him. After they left, I finally mustered the courage to check my phone one last time. There was one last message. Unknown, the officer who had just left failed to check inside the walls. Then from somewhere deep inside the wall, directly behind me, something knocked back. Elise woke up at dawn, the smell of lilacs, her mother's favorite, already thick in the air. She had saved 3 months of allowance for the gift, a vintage, hand-carved locket. To Elise, Lincia wasn't just a mother, she was a sanctuary. They were a closed circuit, just the two of them, against a world that Elise often found too loud and too bright. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Elise whispered, walking into the kitchen. Lincia stood by the stove, her back to Elise. She was unnervingly still. "Thank you, Petal," she replied. Her voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement, thin and brittle. When she turned, Elise noticed a smudge of dark, viscous fluid on her collar. Lincia quickly adjusted her scarf. "I'm making your favorite," Lincia said, gesturing to a bowl of grayish, thick batter. "Family recipe." Elise sat, but the air felt heavy, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. As Lincia flipped a pancake, her sleeve slipped. Elise's breath hitched. Her mother's skin wasn't just pale, it looked like parchment paper stretched over wire. Where Lyncia's pulse should have been, the skin was perfectly, terrifyingly still. "Mom, you're hurt," Elise said, reaching out. "Don't touch me," Lyncia snapped, her eyes flashing an iridescent, oily black before returning to brown. She softened instantly. "I'm just tired, Elise. Go get the mail. Let's have a normal day." Elise went, but her heart was hammering. In the hallway, Elise noticed the cellar door, always triple locked, was ajar. Driven by a cold dread which she couldn't name, she slipped inside. The cellar didn't smell like lilacs. It smelled like a butcher shop in July. In the corner sat a massive, pulsating mound of what looked like translucent wax. Elise's stomach turned as she realized what she was looking at: husks. Human-shaped skins, discarded like old clothes, dozens of them. Elise found a leather-bound journal on a workbench. The handwriting was her mother's, but the dates went back 200 years. May 10th. The molting is painful this year. The girl is 16 now. Her essence is ripening. She loves me so much, the love makes the marrow sweet. I must shed this skin tonight. Elise will be the next vessel. She doesn't know that she isn't human. She doesn't know that we are the carrion muses. We don't beget life, we mimic it until the host burns out. Tch. You weren't supposed to see the cellar, Elise, Lyncia said. Lyncia stood at the top of the stairs. Her face was beginning to sag, the features sliding out of place as if the glue holding her Lyncia mass together had melted. A long, thin appendage, neither finger nor bone, began to poke through the tear in her neck. "You're not my mother," Elise sobbed, backing into the workbench. Her hand closed around a heavy, silver-tipped upholstery needle. "I am the only mother that you will ever know." The entity hissed. The skin on its face rippled like water, and its eyes became voids of shimmering darkness. "The love of a daughter is the strongest anchor to this world. I needed yours to stay anchored, but now the cycle must turn. You are 16, Elise. The change is already in your blood." The creature lunged with a speed that defied physics. Elise acted on pure instinct, swinging the heavy silver needle. It struck true, piercing the center of the shifting mass where a heart should have been. A sound like 1,000 breaking mirrors filled the cellar, and the figure collapsed, dissolving into a fine gray ash that smelled of ancient dust and spent static. Elise collapsed to her knees, trembling. The silence was deafening, but then the sensations began. An intense cold started in her fingertips, spreading up her arms. Elise looked down and saw her skin turning translucent, revealing patterns of shimmering, iridescent light beneath the surface. It wasn't an injury, it was a revelation. Her senses sharpened. She could hear the heartbeat of a bird in a tree outside, and she could feel the lingering echoes of the mother she had just destroyed. She realized then that the journal was right. She wasn't just Elise. She was the next stage of something ancient. The hunger that her mother felt wasn't for malice, but for the energy of connection, a supernatural requirement to maintain a form in this reality. Elise stood up, her movements now possessing a strange, haunting grace. She looked at the vintage locket that she had bought, a gift for a person who never truly existed. She snapped it shut. Her reflection in a dusty cellar mirror showed her eyes flickering with that same oily, iridescent black she had seen in Lyncia. The transformation was settling. She stepped out of the cellar and into the kitchen, the morning sun feeling far too bright against her new, sensitive skin. The world looked different now. It looked like a place of shadows and energy, waiting to be shaped. Elise realized that she would have to find her own way to survive, to find those who would offer the affection which she needed to keep her new form stable. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Elise murmured to the empty house. Her voice was no longer her own. It carried a melodic, metallic ring that vibrated in the air. Elise walked toward the front door, ready to step into a world she no longer belonged to, but one she was now destined to inhabit. "I'm being hunted, and I need someone's help. If I don't get out of this fucking town by midnight, he's coming for me, and this bastard is gonna kill me. I don't know what he is, what he was, or what he is becoming. I'm so out of my depth. My ability has nothing to do with the person hunting me down. Yes, this phenomenon is part of my life, but it's not why I'm scared for my survival." It developed around puberty. Since I was about 12, I have been able to jump into people's bodies. It's not permanent, and there are limitations. It's more of a nuisance. The phenomenon triggers during prolonged skin-to-skin contact. I can hug someone briefly, but a long embrace, a handshake, or intimacy acts as the trigger. The first time, I was shaking my middle school principal's hand. It felt like drowning, suffocating, before coming up for air, only to find myself staring at my own body. My vision was blurry and feathered. I thought it was an out-of-body experience until it happened again with my mother. I could wiggle her fingers and look down at her hands. I tested my limitations. 4 minutes and 3 seconds was my durability inside an adult body before I was violently yanked back. Like elastic, if I pulled too far, I would snap back. Children were easier to inhabit. Adults were harder. By age 15, I could last 15 minutes and 13 seconds in an adult, and 20 minutes and 8 seconds in a child. Babies were a no-go. I was immediately flung back. At 18, starting college, I ran into another limitation. I don't know if the ability mutates, but during my first week, I hugged my roommate and triggered a jump. Post-jump symptoms are a pain. If I'm in a body too long, they bleed from the nose pressure on the brain, I suspect. I don't know what happens to my own body during a jump, only that it enters a sort of stasis. Let's talk about Warren. He was always kind of weird, but since he moved out of his frat house, he's become a different person. I'd known him since freshman year. He was that pretentious know-it-all in my philosophy classes. Trench coat, hands shoved in his pockets, a permanent smirk. He looked like a 20th century detective with a stick up his ass. He debated everyone, doubling down even when proved wrong, insisting his ADHD made him a true intellectual. Nothing comes after death, he argued. We are all going to be consumed by nothing, ending in nothing. We won't even be conscious enough to know we're not thinking. Which is fucking crazy, right? His lips would spread into a grin. We rot, and our memories rot with us until even the slightest speck of our existence fades. His voice would shake, teeth gritted as he spoke of oblivion. He was terrified of his own hypothesis. Rowan, Professor F sighed, trying to steer the class. I'm speaking, Professor, Warren replied calmly. You're wrong, Calrissa spoke up. Warren snapped around, looming over her desk. She looked like she was regretting her existence. Warren used her full name as a manipulation tactic, his tone a carefully constructed facade. Are you religious, Calrissa? He asked, sitting on a chair he dragged toward her. I believe in reincarnation, she said. Okay, so let's say I hypothetically drop dead right now, Warren said, his grin spiteful. Tell me oblivion doesn't exist between my dying and my rebirth. Oh, please, a voice joined from the back. Mogeni. She had an eccentric sense of style and a sharp tongue. Sweetie, it's clear you're scared of death. You're full of BS. Warren's lips pricked. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, but I don't care. Mogeni. I've been sitting here for half a semester. So, you're a stalker. I'm just a good listener, she replied. She dismantled his arguments, tearing down the walls he'd built. For once, Warren was speechless, sweating, his fingers clenching into fists. That was the start of a curious friendship. Warren moved into a massive house owned by Rashil, a student rumored to have mafia ties. Mogini moved in shortly after. I watched them from afar. Warren, once a frat boy who endured brutal hazing in the rain without flinching, started changing. He became pale, almost translucent. Everything about them grew disturbing. One Friday night, they walked into a party looking different color back in their cheeks, eyes no longer sunken. Warren went straight to the kitchen to pull all the blinds shut. Mogini became hyper-talkative. I found Rachel in the kitchen, scarfing down raw bacon. He was a smooth talker usually, but his eyes were now vacant and feral. I cornered Warren in the hallway. He was talking to a student named Moss. I was sacrificed to a cult, and now I crave the taste of human flesh, Warren joked darkly. Sam didn't laugh. Warren shoved him away, his gaze flicking to the windows as if he were scared of something behind them. The night of the full moon, I saw them on the doorstep. Warren, Mogeni, and Rachel. When the moonlight hit them, they stood perfectly still. They didn't move. They just stared at the sky. Months later, I decided to jump into Warren's body. I needed answers. I sat in front of him in class. "Are you free tonight?" I asked. He smiled, but his grip on my wrist turned into a vice. "How about now?" I screamed as he crushed my tendons. I slipped into him. It was cold. There was no heartbeat, just a cavernous hole where his soul used to be. I was in his body, but it felt like a corpse. I opened his eyes and found myself in his kitchen, kneeling in dried blood. Symbols were carved into the ceiling and floor with claws. I opened the refrigerator. Human remains. Warren had been killing his roommates. A needle pricked his neck. I felt warm arms drag me back as a voice whispered, "He's still inside you, but don't worry, I'm going to get him out. Permanently." It was Moss. I woke up on a surgical table, strapped down. Above me, the moon bled through a skylight. Moss held a sledgehammer. "I'm doing this to protect the town from you," he said. He leaned closer, but suddenly he shrieked. Something ripped him apart. I heard spine-snapping sounds and gorging. Then, Rakhil was there, his eyes feral, teeth stained with blood. He stared at me and growled, "Who the fuck are you?" I was catapulted back into my own body. I awoke under the trees. Warren stood over me, wearing a crown of bone shards in his curls. "I want to play a game," he murmured. "Run," he said. "I'll give you a head start." I ran. It's been 6 hours. I can hear his slamming footsteps. He's getting closer. And he's going to catch me. I was driving along the desolate canyon road late at night when I saw a young couple on the shoulder. I pulled over and rolled down the window. "Hey, you two doing okay?" The girl turned to me, looking exhausted and ready to give up. "Not really, mister. Our car broke down about 5 miles back and our phone died. I don't know what we're gonna do." "Well, I'm headed into the valley. Need a ride?" Her smile lit up the night. "Absolutely, mister. Thanks so much." I unlocked the door and they climbed into the back seat. "I'm Clark. What do you two go by?" "I'm Abi," replied the young man. "And this is my girl, Ajik." "Nice to meet you. Where are you two headed?" I asked. "We're trying to get to Oakham. I've got a job waiting there," Abi added. "I can't go all the way to Oakham, but I can get you into the valley. You can get a room for the night and find a mechanic in the morning." "That'd be fantastic, mister." "We'd really appreciate it," the girl said, stressing really suggestively. I continued to drive down the road, the unchanging view and rumble of the engine lulling me into a sense of calm. "So how often do you drive these roads, Mr. Clark?" asked the young man, breaking my train of thought. "About 5 times a month." "That's a lot of driving," said the young girl, whistling. "Do you ever worry being on the road alone at night?" "Nah. I'm used to these parts. Besides, it's pretty boring here. Seems kind of spooky to me. You never know what could happen." "Well, whatever does, I reckon I can handle it." I refocused on driving, the music from the radio calming my thoughts. "You seem sad, mister." "My wife passed away recently. This was her favorite song." "I'm sorry," she replied. "It must be tough, losing someone like that." "It is. She died of a heart condition. She was my whole world." "How long have you two been together?" I asked, changing the subject. "We grew up next door to each other," the boy replied. "I guess you could say we've been together our whole lives." "Do you spend a lot of time on the road?" "This is our first trip in a while. If the car hadn't broken down, we wouldn't have stopped till we got to Oakham." I kept driving, relaxing into the silence as the miles passed behind me. "Hey, mister, what kind of car is this?" "It's a Ford F-150, the finest truck in America. It's nice." "How much do you figure it's worth?" "I don't know. Maybe $35K. Why? Looking to buy one?" "Maybe someday. For now, I think we'll take this one." I felt a pressure on the back of my seat and heard a gun cock. "This is your own fault," she said coldly. "Picking up hitchhikers in the middle of the night, you really have only yourself to blame. So this is why you're out hitchhiking at night, to steal people's cars?" "Actually, the cars are just a side benefit. It's really about the feeling." "What are you talking about?" Have you ever stood next to someone when they're about to die? When their life is literally about to end and you know that you're the cause? It's the most amazing feeling in the world. Powerful, like God, dispensing life and death. There's nothing like it. Enough talking, babe, said the boy. Let's just do him and take the car. Be patient, baby. We'll kill him soon enough. Let's make sure we've got everything first. Hey, mister, she said innocently, then giggled. Why do men always fall for that? Idiots, get out of the car. I got out, standing while they exited behind me, the boy with his gun pointed at my back. March, she ordered, pointing to the woods beside the road. I walked until I came to a stop underneath a tree. Empty your pockets, the girl ordered, wallet, phone, and keys. I handed them over. So, how does it feel to know your life is about to end? My life ended a year ago. I stared at the trees behind me. Remember when I said my wife died of a heart condition? Technically that's true. She died of a broken heart. A year ago, our son Libel was out driving this road when he stopped to pick up some hitchhikers. But these hitchhikers wanted to steal his truck. They killed him. Left his body lying in the woods. Right about here, actually. After he was killed, we tried to go on, but Beth couldn't handle the grief. She died shortly after. I lost them both in a month. Since then, I've been driving this road, hoping to run into the bastards who killed them. I looked her in the eye. Sound familiar? She looked back at me arrogantly. That kid was your son? God, what a loser. Did you know that he begged for his life at the end? Pathetic. I stared at her. You're both gonna get what's coming to you. Keep dreaming, old man. Abi, finish this. The boy raised his gun toward me. Last chance, son. Too late, old man. No more chances. Before he could pull the trigger, there was a loud creaking and the boy dropped the gun as he was raised in the air. His face was twisted in pure, unadulterated terror. Abi, the girl screamed as she stared at her boyfriend, being held aloft by a thick tree branch as another punched through his chest. The girl tried to run, but a third branch wrapped around her, lifting her and tightening until her screams and the sound of her ribs cracking reverberated through the forest. I looked at the tree tall, majestic, standing proud in the night. In the patterns of its bark, I thought I could see Libel's smile. The air fryer chimed, signaling that my smiley fries were done. I know it may seem childish to be eating little potato patties that were shaped like smiley faces, but I honestly liked the flavor and texture of them. After grabbing a pot holder to protect my hand, I opened the air fryer and pulled out the little basket that contained my fries. That's weird, I said when I saw the little round potato faces staring up at me. They weren't smiling like they were supposed to be. They were all frowning. I set the basket back inside the air fryer and went to the pantry to retrieve the box I'd pulled the fries out of. When I looked at the label, I was shocked to see it said Frowny Freeze and pictured several frowning potato cakes. I was positive the label had said S Smiley Freeze when I pulled it out earlier. That's when I heard my wife, Adina, sobbing in the other room. Hey honey, what's wrong? She was sitting on the edge of the sofa, so I sat down beside her. It didn't work. Adina showed me the pregnancy test she was holding in her hand. It indicated she wasn't pregnant. We expected this, remember? I reminded her. The doctor said the treatments could take a few months before they are effective. I know, she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I just thought this would be a lot easier. It'll happen, I assured her. We just have to be patient. I got up and kissed the top of her head. As I was leaving the room, I stopped in the doorway and turned back to ask, You don't know anything about the frowny fries in the pantry, do you? Sorry, Adina replied. That's my fault. Ever since I went through puberty, whenever I feel extremely strong emotions, it changes random things around me to match my mood. You joking, right? I gave her a skeptical look. I wish I were. She reached over, picked up the magazine that was sitting on the coffee table, and showed me the cover, which featured an old picture of Henry Winkler as the Fonz from the show Happy Days. What was odd about the picture was that the Fonz wasn't smiling. He was frowning, and instead of having his signature thumbs-up pose, he had both of his thumbs pointing down. The name of the show on the cover had also been altered so that it said SADDAs instead of Happy Days. You're serious, aren't you? I wanted to believe it was just an elaborate prank, but I didn't think she would do something like that, given how upset she was about not being pregnant. I know I should have told you sooner, Adina said, but I didn't want you to think I was a freak. How come I haven't noticed until now? Because you didn't want to notice, she replied. It's happened about a dozen times since we've been married. Really? Remember when we had that big fight a couple of months ago? Yeah, I nodded. It was a silly fight when she found out one of my ex-girlfriends had been hired at the office where I worked. You were really pissed. I remember getting a drink from the fridge and you knocking it out of my hand and telling me to leave. Adina got up, retrieved something from the bottom drawer of the hallway bureau, and brought it over to me. It was an empty, slightly crumpled can of liquid death, something I frequently drank. No, I corrected myself after looking closer at the label. It's not liquid death. It's something called death liquid. I told you to leave for your own safety, Adina revealed. If I hadn't knocked that drink out of your hand, she pointed at the can, drinking it would have killed you. I had never done the school run before. Work took up practically all of my time from Monday to Friday, but in the last week of the summer holidays, my wife's mother passed away. She had gone down south to support her father and help with the funeral arrangements, which left me to hold the fort. As much as I miss her, it's been nice to spend so much one-on-one time with Lilda. She is the spitting image of her mother, and her likeness doesn't stop there. She has the same sharp wit and an emotional intelligence way beyond her 6 years. I suppose with me always being at work and Lilda being an only child, it makes a lot of sense. They spend a lot of time together, especially over the holidays. Lilda was happy to give me directions as I drove her to school. I do know the way, of course, but I enjoyed playing along with the idea that I didn't. So, first day of year 2, I teased. She turned and frowned at me. I could tell exactly what face she was pulling without taking my eyes off the road. What? I laughed. It's year 3, actually, she said, matter-of-factly. No way. When did you get old? She just smiled and turned to look out the window. Daddy? Whenever she had anything to say, Lilda always had to say my name first, then wait for my response. I'd told her many times that she could just start talking, and I would know that she was talking to me, but it didn't seem to ever sink in. It was cute, if not a little frustrating sometimes. Yes? Was it dangerous when you went to school? That caught me off guard. Dangerous? Yeah, because of the dinosaurs. She erupted into laughter at her own joke. The sound of it was so infectious. Very funny, I chuckled. Are you looking forward to your first day back? Yeah. Kids. Brilliant at carrying conversations. What are you looking forward to the most? She didn't answer right away. I could almost hear the cogs ticking. Playing with my friends. Oh, and my new teacher is Mrs. Bingson. Layla says she's the best. Layla is Lilda's cousin on my wife's side. She's in the year above. Won't you miss your old teacher? No, she responded, so quickly that she must have felt strongly about it. She was the worst teacher. I felt a sudden pang of guilt. My own daughter had suffered a year with the worst teacher, and I'd had no idea. How was she the worst? I prodded. She was always cross. She didn't like fun. She told me off when I cried. Oh, that's not very nice. On the last day of school, I played a trick on her. Lilda giggled to herself and shot me a mischievous smile. That's my girl, I thought. It was Chalar's idea, she continued. We were in the art annex, and she went in the cupboard where the pens and paper are, and I locked the door. I laughed. I remembered doing something similar back in my school days. That way, Lilda shouted, leaning forward in her seat, pointing down the road that led to her school. I had seen it coming a mile off, but had chosen to pretend that I hadn't. Lilda was looking very pleased with herself. I parked as close as I could to the school gates, which was not close at all. My wife had complained about the school drop-off before, but it was even worse than I'd imagined. I walked Lilda down the pavement and to the school gate. I gave her a big hug and kissed her on the forehead. Have a great day. I will, she chirped, then ran off to join a line of other kids about her size. I watched her for a while, finding her friends, talking about whatever little kids talk about, always smiling. My attention turned to the teachers. They all looked stressed. They weren't even pretending to be happy about being back at work. Lilda glanced over at me. I gave her a wave and made my way back down the pavement. A group of mums filled the pavement ahead, 2 pushchairs causing a barricade. They seemed engrossed in serious conversation or serious gossip. I couldn't tell which at a distance. As I got closer, I overheard little snippets of information. Mrs. Kerba didn't show up to teach the year 2s. She's not answering her phone or anything. I heard she wasn't at the teacher training day either. A friend of mine is her neighbor, and she says she hasn't seen her all summer. I stopped in my tracks. A wave of dread rushed over me. Mrs. Kerba, the year 2 teacher, Lilda's teacher last year. I turned back towards the school and marched up to the gates on wobbly legs. The children had all gone inside. I walked up to reception and tried to calm my breathing. Hi, I'm Lilda's dad. She left her coat in the art annex before the summer holidays. My wife asked me to get it B back. I just about managed to get the words out. Yes, of course, the chirpy receptionist replied. It's just around the left side of the building. It's not been opened yet, so here's the key. Just drop it back when you're done. You can leave it open. She smiled, a bright, over-friendly smile, and returned to her work. It's a coincidence, I kept telling myself as I walked around the left side of the building. The art annex was one of those temporary classrooms, almost like a static caravan, but more basic. The walls were a rough texture, painted navy blue, and it had a flat felt roof. My stomach was in knots as I approached the door. The keys jingled in my unsteady hand. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight, casting long rectangles across the room. My eyes swept about the place, then focused on the desk. A handbag sat upon its surface. Lilda's words echoed through my mind. S. I played a trick on her. S. I locked the door. My heart raced as I looked to what I assumed was the storage cupboard. I walked slowly towards it, my feet barely leaving the floor, my mind expecting the worst and trying to reassure me at the same time. I tried the door. Locked. Please, no, I whispered to myself. I turned the latch. The door swung open by itself. The sound came first, the wet thwack against the carpet. Then the smell. I leapt back, gagging, covering my face with my hands as my breakfast sprayed out from between my fingers. As much as I didn't want to look, I couldn't look away. She was curled in a ball, holding her knees to her chest. I guess she'd been leaning against the door. Her skin was brown and leathery, wrapped tightly around her bones. Her white summer dress was stained with large, wet blotches of yellow and brown. She was dead because of my poor, sweet, innocent Lilda. A childish joke with severe consequences. I sobbed uncontrollably as I burst back outside. What would I say? What would it do to Lilda if she ever found out? If I tell the truth, everyone will know. If I lie, if I just so happen to discover the body while looking for Lilda's coat, then what? It wouldn't take long for questions to be asked. Who locked the cupboard? I don't know what to do. 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 I've always seen them. Not all the time, not on everyone, but I have always been able to see them on some people. I asked my parents about it when I was young. They knew, right? Adults know everything. That's what you think when you're young. But they never understood. My father got mad if I asked too often. He told me, with increasing anger, that people don't have clocks on their right arms. He insisted these aren't counting down, and they don't suddenly appear on some people's arms while being absent on others. I learned my lesson as a child. I didn't want to be bullied at school or, even worse, be forced by my parents to go to therapy for my hallucinations. So, I pretended I didn't see them anymore. But, of course, I still did. I learned what they were when I was 10. I had my suspicions for a long time. The clock appeared on my grandmother's arm when we were visiting her, Ace 364 2002, 1020, 1005. She was already in poor health at that point. I think you see where this is going. She died exactly 1 year later when her clock hit 00 zows. Days, hours, minutes, seconds. That was 20 years ago. My life has mostly been normal since then. I've never dared to bring up the numbers again to anyone. I still don't know why I see them, or why they only appear a year before someone's death. The internet didn't yield any results either. It has been my secret. I felt many emotions because of it. Pity sometimes, when I saw the clock on a stranger who was far too young to have one. Resignation, perhaps, when the numbers first appeared on struggling elderly relatives. Sometimes just curiosity, such as wondering whether they would start counting from 366 instead of 365 in leap years. You can imagine the emotions I felt when they appeared on my arm. That was last year, over 11 months ago. I remember it was a Friday night, and I emptied every single bit of alcohol I could find in my house. But the drinks didn't stop the clock from counting the next morning. It still counts while I'm writing this. I look at my right arm, Geo 20, 20,000, 20,037, 20,037, 1,037, 20,037. 2,000, 18,037, 23. Chi. I was shocked, of course I was. But nothing could prepare me for being even more stunned the next day when I saw the clocks on the cashier in the shop. I saw them on old people, on little children, on every person without a single exception. They varied slightly here and there, but I've never encountered one that deviates more than 5 minutes from mine. I've been to several countries for work since last year, and it's the same everywhere. If the clocks are correct, and they have always been, every single person is going to die in less than 3 weeks. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds unbelievable, and I know most readers will not believe this, but I hope someone understands what I mean. I've checked every news source I could find in every language I can read or translate. I can find absolutely nothing that suggests a disaster is coming, but I am 100% sure it will. So, if anyone understands what I mean, please let me know. Please. I look outside to the group of children passing by the window. The youngest, probably around 4 or 5, is laughing and teasing the girl next to him. I can see his arm, 020 11,018. Dear 20,000 11,058 1017. My heart sinks again.